When you watch true crime, um, do you actually know the microscopic difference between the person who gets 10 years in prison versus, like, life without parole?
Right, because we consume so much of this media, but the line between those two sentences, it isn't just about what happened.
Yeah, exactly. It's about this really complex web of legal theory and microscopic evidence and just human psychology.
Well, the justice system is so often portrayed as this simple mechanical equation, like if you can point a weapon, you pull a trigger, the gavel falls.
Case closed.
Right, case closed. But the moment you step into the real mechanics of prosecuting a homicide, that neat little equation just shatters.
It really does.
You immediately find yourself navigating just the absolute definition of muddy waters, both legally and diagnostically.
Which is exactly what we are exploring today. We are taking a massive stack of sources for this deep dive.
You've got a lot of ground to cover.
Oh, tons. We've got detailed legal breakdowns of U.S. and U.K. law, a really gritty forensic documentary, real-world accounts of notorious serial killers, and the transcripts of the most absurd courtroom defenses ever attempted.
Some of which defy all logic.
They really do. And our mission is to extract the actual science and strategy happening behind the scenes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because for anyone out there who devours true crime documentaries, or, if you just want to understand the actual mechanics of the justice system, this deep dive is going to give you an expert's lens.
You'll be able to see right through the standard TV tropes, basically.
Yes. You'll understand the actual heavy machinery operating in the crime lab and the courtroom. I'm so excited to uncover the science here.
It is fascinating, but to understand the ultimate crime, we have to look objectively at the facts, the law, and the human psychology.
Right.
And before a detective ever bags a piece of evidence, we have to define the crime itself.
Because in the eyes of the law, taking a human life is not a monolith.
Exactly. Not all killings are created equal.
So we're starting with the legal foundation. I think people who follow true crime, they already know the basic divide, right?
Like between lawful and unlawful.
Yeah. It's like a giant umbrella. Homicide is simply one person killing another.
Yeah.
You have lawful, like true self-defense on one branch and unlawful on the other.
But the key that actually unlocks an unlawful murder charge is intent.
What the law calls mens rea, right?
Yes, mens rea, a guilty mind. Specifically, what prosecutors are looking for is malice aforethought.
Which always sounds like such an archaic term to me.
It is a bit old school, yeah, but it is the absolute bedrock of murder charges. And it doesn't necessarily mean spite or hatred in the emotional sense.
Right.
Legally, it just means the intent to kill, or the intent to cause serious bodily harm, or acting with a reckless indifference to human life.
And this is where the U.S. system splits into degrees, isn't it?
It is. So first-degree murder is intentional and premeditated. Second degree is intentional, but without that prior planning.
Or it involves that reckless indifference you mentioned.
Exactly. Sometimes they call it a depraved heart murder.
Like the Conrad Murray case.
Right. That is a prime example of testing that boundary. When he administered propofol to Michael Jackson, the fierce legal debate was whether his actions crossed the line into the reckless indifference required for second-degree murder.
Or if it was just severe criminal negligence.
Yeah, which drops the charge down to involuntary manslaughter.
So to break this down, our sources actually provided this wild, escalating thought experiment. It's the story of a hypothetical woman named Rosie.
Oh, the Rosie scenario is brilliant. It pushes, every single legal boundary in the span of one narrative.
Okay, let's unpack this. So Rosie is furious at this guy named Jason. She plots for 2 weeks to kill him.
She tracks his schedule, buys a weapon, all of that.
Right, she sets out to do it. That is clear-cut, first-degree murder.
Yes, the malice aforethought is completely premeditated.
But on her way to find Jason, a stranger on the street stops her and just aggressively corrects her grammar.
Which is annoying, but...
Right, but Rosie is already on edge. So she snaps and she shoots the stranger.
Now that shifts to second-degree murder.
Because it was intentional in the moment, but there was no prior planning to kill that specific grammar-correcting man.
Right, and correcting someone's grammar is definitely not considered adequate legal provocation.
Obviously. But the scenario escalates from there. Rosie flees that scene in her car, right? She panics.
She's driving 90 miles an hour down a crowded sidewalk.
And she runs over a guy named Donnie. Now, she absolutely did not mean to kill him.
But driving 90 on a sidewalk is grossly, criminally negligent.
So that makes it vehicular or involuntary manslaughter.
Yes. And finally, she crashes the car, stumbles out, and a paroled convict jumps from an alley and violently assaults her.
Terrified for her life, she shoots him.
which introduces voluntary manslaughter.
Wait, not self-defense.
Well, it could be, but in the context of reducing a murder charge, a violent physical assault serves as adequate provocation to claim a heat of passion defense.
Which is voluntary manslaughter.
I love how that scenario tests the limits. But I have to ask because this always feels ambiguous on TV.
What's that?
How long does premeditation actually take? Is it weeks of planning, like Rosie tracking Jason, or can it legally be just a few seconds of calculation before pulling the trigger?
Oh, that's a great question. What's fascinating here is that the law focuses entirely on the extent of reflection, not the length of time on a clock.
So it can be fast?
Very fast.
Uh-huh.
A cold, calculated decision can be reached in mere seconds. Premeditation doesn't require days of mapping out a conspiracy on a whiteboard, you know?
Right.
It simply requires that the person weighed the consequences in their mind and decided to act anyway. That mental pivot from should I to I will, that is the premeditation.
Wow. Okay, so our sources noted the UK handles this entirely differently, which is interesting because so much of US law is based on English common law.
Yeah, the UK system actually evolved away from the American degree system to simplify things.
So they don't have first and second degree. Nope. In the UK, murder is just murder. Instead, they compensate for that by layering incredible nuance into their manslaughter charges.
Oh, I see.
They have three distinct tiers: voluntary, gross negligence, and unlawful or dangerous act manslaughter. They use those tiers to handle the nuances of intent and recklessness, rather than fracturing the murder charge itself.
Okay, so that defines the theoretical crime in the mind of the killer. But investigators still have to prove the actual physical act.
Right. Intent lives in the mind, but the act leaves physical proof.
Exactly. We have to move from the theoretical law down to the microscopic crime scene.
Every contact leaves a trace.
Yes.
That is the foundational principle of forensic science, established by Edmund Locard over a century ago.
And let's start with fingerprints, because the physical precision required to capture one just blew my mind.
It is incredibly delicate work.
When investigators take a fingerprint, they have to roll the ink on incredibly thin, right? They do this because the microscopic gaps between the ridge patterns on your finger only protrude about 100 microns.
And to put that in perspective, 100 microns is a tenth of a millimeter.
Wow.
It's roughly the thickness of a single strand of human hair. If the ink is too thick, it just pools in those microscopic valleys and you get a black smudge.
Useless for court.
Totally useless. And when a forensic expert analyzes those ridges, they aren't just looking for a general shape. They are mapping specific tiny landmarks.
Like loops, whorls, islands.
Yeah, and bifurcations where a single ridge splits into two.
And our sources say they need 12 matching characteristics to confirm an identity in court.
12 points of comparison, yes.
The mathematical chance of a total match across all 10 digits is 1 in an octillion.
Right.
Which is a number with 27 zeros.
It is absolute mathematical certainty, but, modern forensics goes much deeper than just the surface of the skin.
Right, like microfibers. This is fascinating.
The anisotropic compensator?
Yes. Under a microscope equipped with an anisotropic compensator, experts can look at a tiny thread from a crime scene and instantly identify its chemical makeup.
And without destroying the evidence, which is key.
How does that actually work?
While the mechanics are incredible, synthetic fibers are anisotropic. That means their physical and molecular structure actually bends light differently depending on what they are made of.
Okay.
So when a scientist looks through an anisotropic compensator, which uses polarized light, they don't just see a thread. They see a specific spectrum of color refraction.
So without even running a chemical test that might destroy this crucial tiny piece of evidence, they can look through this polarized lens and instantly say, the way this light is bending proves this is red polyester.
Exactly.
Whereas this other fiber is blue cotton.
Precisely. It preserves the evidence while identifying its exact origin. And speaking of chemical origins, we really have to talk about the science of the gunshot itself.
Okay, wait. So when TV detectives confidently announce they found gunpowder residue on a suspect's hands, is that scientifically wrong?
It is entirely wrong. It's just a persistent myth. Yeah. Gunpowder is organic. It's primarily composed of nitrocellulose. In the extreme explosive heat of a gunshot, which can reach up to 2,500 degrees Celsius, that nitrocellulose burns up almost completely.
It just vaporizes.
Exactly. What forensic scientists are actually looking for in the lab is gunshot residue, or GSR.
Which is heavy metals.
Yes.
We are talking about antimony, barium, and mercury. And these elements come from the fulminate cap, or the primer, at the base of the bullet.
Right.
GSR is basically like a microscopic glitter bomb.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
It gets absolutely everywhere, but exactly where it lands on your body tells the undeniable physical story of whether you were holding the explosive when it went off or if you just picked it up later.
That analogy perfectly captures the physics of a shooting. Our sources highlighted a brilliant blind test that demonstrates this blowback effect.
Oh, the Alina case.
Right. In this dramatized case involving a woman named Alina being shot, forensic experts swabbed two men at the scene.
The husband and the neighbor.
Yes. The husband, Andre, claimed he merely picked the gun up off the floor after the shooting to secure it. The neighbor, Nikita, claimed he never touched the weapon at all.
And the microscopic glitter bomb told the truth. Andre only had GSR on his palms, which completely aligned with his story of just picking the weapon up by the grip after the fact.
Exactly.
But Nikita had heavy concentrations of GSR on the back of his hands, across his face, and embedded in his hair.
He was the one who actually fired the weapon.
Boom, caught.
The physical blowback from the chamber erupting just paints the shooter in a mist of heavy metals. And finally, in this microscopic world, there is the gold standard, DNA.
Right. We constantly hear about DNA being extracted from a single hair found at a crime scene. But the DNA isn't actually in the hair shaft itself, is it?
No, it's not. The hair shaft is basically dead keratin tissue.
So to get a DNA profile, investigators have to find a hair with the root sheath still attached.
Yes, the vaginal tunic.
Because that sheath contains the living cells at the base of the follicle.
Exactly. And then scientists hit those cells with a lysis buffer.
The chemistry here is wild. The buffer literally breaks down the lipid membranes of the cell walls,
It destroys the cell to unleash the DNA inside.
allowing them to sequence the unique nucleotides.
The science is incredibly precise, but, if we connect this to the bigger picture, forensic science sounds foolproof when we discuss it in the context of a sterile, brightly lit laboratory.
Sure.
But applying it in the chaotic, muddy, real world to actually hunt down a serial killer, that takes massive coordination, immense time, and sometimes a terrifying amount of luck.
Yeah, let's look at how this physical evidence caught real monsters out in the world, starting with Bobby Joe Long in 1984.
The Tampa serial killer.
Right. He murdered at least 9 women, but his spree was ended because of the sheer willpower and psychological resilience of one survivor.
A 17-year-old named Lisa McVeigh.
She was abducted, held hostage, and blindfolded for 26 hours. But despite the trauma, she kept a hyper-aware, level head.
Her situational awareness was staggering. While blindfolded, she managed to systematically memorize details of her environment.
Yeah, she peeked under the blindfold to read the word magnum on the dashboard, and she memorized the very specific red interior of his vehicle.
And when she was finally released, she gave that hyper-specific description to the police.
Which allowed the FBI to take red carpet fibers they had already found on the previous murder victims and match them directly to the unique carpeting in Bobby Joe Long's specific red Dodge Magnum.
It's incredible.
A microscopic fiber, analyzed in a lab, but only found because of a terrified teenager's memory, is what ended his reign of terror.
It is just the perfect marriage of human witness psychology and forensic science. But investigations don't always align so perfectly.
No, they don't.
Sometimes human psychology actively derails the science. Take the tragic case of Derek Todd Lee, the Baton Rouge serial killer who murdered multiple women between 2001 and 2003.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How does an official FBI profile get it so wrong in the Derek Todd Lee case by predicting a white suspect? And how much did that tunnel vision actually delay justice?
It is a textbook example of investigative bias and cognitive anchoring.
Cognitive anchoring.
Yeah, profiling is often inductive. It relies on historical data. So the FBI task force looked at the historical demographics of serial killers who operated in similar geographic and behavioral patterns.
Oh, wait.
And they anchored to the conclusion that the suspect must be a white male between 25 and 35 years old.
They just got stuck on that idea.
They became so deeply invested in this profile that they ran a massive DNA dragnet, swabbing over 1,000 white men in the area.
Meanwhile, the nearby Zachary Police Department kept trying to warn the task force about Derek Todd Lee.
Who was a black man.
Right. A black man who lived in the area with a known, escalating history of stalking, peeping, and violence against women.
But the task force actively ignored the Zachary Police Department because Lee didn't fit their statistical profile.
They prioritize historical data over active local intelligence.
Sadly, yes.
It wasn't until another survivor, Diane Alexander, bravely fought him off and provided a composite sketch of an African-American man that the investigation was forced to pivot.
And in 2003, they finally swabbed Lee, and his DNA matched all 6 murders.
That tunnel vision cost lives.
It is a devastating reminder that science is only as objective as the humans applying it. And, sometimes investigators do everything right, but the technology simply has to catch up to the suspect.
Oh, like Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer.
Yes, murdered anywhere from 48 to 80 women in the Seattle area during the 1980s.
He was actually a prime suspect early on in the investigation.
He was.
He even passed a polygraph test in 1984. He eluded police for 2 decades. It wasn't until the year 2001 that advanced DNA technology was finally able to catch him.
Using a simple saliva swab that police had the foresight to take from him all the way back in 1987.
So how did that actually work? They had the swab but couldn't test it.
Right. In 1987, the DNA in that saliva swab was too small and degraded to test. But the mechanism that finally caught him was PCR, or polymerase chain reaction technology.
Okay, PCR.
It acts like a molecular photocopier. By 2001, scientists could take that tiny degraded sample from 1987, amplify it by copying the genetic sequence millions of times, and finally read it clearly.
Wow.
That octillion-to-1 microscopic certainty is what put Ridgway away for good.
So, we have traced the theory of the law, the microscopic precision of the lab, and the psychological pitfalls of the manhunt. But catching the killer isn't the end of the story.
Not at all.
Because once they are sitting at the defense table, the prosecution still has to prove that Menz turned it over, that specific intent we discussed at the very beginning, to a jury of 12 people.
And the courtroom becomes a battleground of psychology.
And honestly, sometimes sheer desperation.
The courtroom is really where the physical evidence meets human interpretation.
Let's examine a defense strategy that is highly relevant right now. Extreme emotional disturbance, or EAD. Our sources highlight this legal mechanism in relation to the Luigi Mangione case, the recent shooting of the United Healthcare CEO.
Right, and we need to be incredibly clear for you listening. We are looking at ED strictly as a legal mechanic, impartially, based on the source material provided.
Yes, absolutely. We're not endorsing any viewpoints or taking a side on the case itself. We're simply unpacking how the law operates in this territory.
So an impartial look at ED reveals this fascinating legal compromise. It is important to understand that ED is not an insanity defense.
Right, because in an insanity plea, the defense argues the defendant was experiencing a complete break from reality and literally did not know right from wrong.
Exactly. ED acknowledges that the defendant knew exactly what they were doing and they knew it was legally wrong.
So what does an ED defense actually attempt to prove then?
Well, it argues that at the exact time of the crime, the defendant experienced such intense rage, panic, or grief that their self-control was substantially impaired.
Okay, so they were overwhelmed by an emotional crisis.
Right, an emotional crisis that has a reasonable explanation. And if a jury buys an ED defense, it does not result in a not guilty verdict.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Yeah.
Instead, it mitigates the culpability.
Yeah.
It reduces a first-degree murder conviction down to manslaughter.
Wow, okay. But looking at the ED defense practically, where exactly does the law draw the line between a valid emotional breakdown and a defendant just manufacturing an excuse after the fact to avoid a murder charge?
That is the immense burden placed on the jury. The law requires a strict 2-part test. First, there is the subjective test. Was the defendant actually experiencing an extreme emotional disturbance?
Which I assume requires heavy psychiatric testimony.
Absolutely, to prove a genuine loss of control.
Yeah.
Then second, there is the objective test. Was there a reasonable explanation for that disturbance under the circumstances as the defendant perceived them?
And the prosecution's going to fight that hard.
Relentlessly. They will attack this by showing any evidence of planning or a cooling-off period. They will argue that buying a weapon, traveling, or hiding evidence proves the act was calculated, not an impulsive loss of control.
Man, that is an incredibly high bar to clear.
It is.
Which makes the cases where defendants completely abandon logic and present desperate, impossible defenses so wild to look at.
Some legal defenses truly defy physics and reality. Take Richard Merritt, a disgraced attorney who slashed and bludgeoned his 77-year-old mother to death on the very day he was supposed to report to prison for financial crimes.
His defense strategy was staggering. He took the stand and claimed that as his mother was cooking his final meal before prison, 2 random masked men knocked on the door.
2 random assassins.
Right. He claimed they pointed pistols at him,
Fair.
brought a 35-pound dumbbell up from the basement, brutally killed his mother right in front of him, and then just walked out.
And his explanation for his actions afterward.
He vanished to Tennessee for 8 months, lived under a fake name, and never called the police because, he claimed, the phantom assassins threatened him.
These weak defenses are like a kid with chocolate all over their face claiming a ghost ate the cake.
Seriously, the jury saw straight through the impossibility of the narrative. They took less than an hour to convict him.
Then there is the infamous Robert Durst. He was on trial for the execution-style murder of his best friend, Susan Berman.
Oh, this one is wild.
Durst had previously accidentally admitted on audio to writing an anonymous cadaver note to the police, alerting them to the location of her body.
So his defense team had to explain why he wrote the note.
Right. He took the stand and claimed he merely walked into her house, found her dead on the floor, bent down, and felt her breath.
And he confusingly testified on the stand that her breath felt cold, even though she was dead.
Yeah, he claimed that he then wrote the anonymous note to police because he didn't want his famous, recognizable voice recorded on a 911 call.
The prosecutor systematically dismantled him on the stand, just pointing out the absolute biological absurdity of feeling the cold breath of a corpse.
He was convicted.
And we can't forget Darrell Brooks, Jr., who represented himself after driving his SUV through a holiday parade.
Oh, the sovereign citizen defense.
Yep, he claimed to be a sovereign citizen, arguing the trial court literally had no jurisdiction over him. He even asked the jury for nullification, just asking them to ignore the law entirely.
Or Anthony Tote, who murdered his wife and 3 children.
This one is so dark.
He originally gave a full confession stating it was an apocalyptic suicide pact, but by the time the trial began, he completely changed his story.
What did he claim?
He blamed his deceased wife for killing the children and herself, and he claimed he couldn't remember his own detailed confession because he was heavily stoned on Benadryl.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. When we synthesize all of this source material, a clear picture really emerges.
Well, you've moved from the theoretical, legal definitions of homicide down into the octillion-to-1 microscopic certainty of fiber analysis and DNA.
We have navigated the real-world manhunts where cognitive bias can severely derail justice.
And finally, we have watched the psychological theater play out in the courtroom as defendants attempt to explain away the undeniable physical evidence.
So what does this all mean for you listening?
It means the next time you put on a true crime documentary, you aren't just a passive viewer.
No, you know to look for the mens rea.
You know that gunshot residue is a heavy metal blowback, not gunpowder.
And when a suspect takes the stand, you understand the legal thresholds they are desperately trying to manipulate.
You understand the complex machinery operating behind the gavel. We started this deep dive talking about simple equations, point a weapon, pull a trigger, go to jail.
But as we've seen, that equation is completely shattered by human complexity.
Which leaves me with one final lingering question for you to mull over. As forensic technology like rapid DNA sequencing and AI-driven microfiber analysis becomes completely mathematically undeniable, will the courtroom defenses of the future shift entirely away from, "I didn't do it"?
That's a great question.
Will we reach a point where physical evidence is so absolute that the ultimate defense moves entirely into the murky waters of human psychology? Will defendants simply begin arguing, "My brain chemistry made me do it"?
It is a chilling and very real possibility for the future of the justice system.
Something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time.